Hello and welcome back to the midierror Meets interview series where we speak to all kinds of people who work in sound and music. On the show this time we have David Frangioni, who is an incredible person who has achieved an unbelievable amount of things so far in his career. He was the in-house engineer with Aerosmith back in the day growing up with Boston. He survived eye cancer when he was 2 years old. He picked up drumming. He now has his own drumming hall of fame with some of the world's most amazing kits inside it. He was part of one of the first ever digital-only Billboard #1s, which he goes into. He appeared on the Osbournes with Ozzy Osbourne building his studio back in the day. He's also done some immersive mixes for the Kiss back catalogue and their anniversary releases. He's published a book on drumming called Crash, and he was there at the cusp of MIDI and the studio becoming accessible. So much to get into, and stick around and I will recommend another episode for your delectation at the end. Please support Sonic State if you can, but we're going to get into the interview, and the first thing I asked David was about where he is.
Okay, I am in Palm Beach, Florida. I moved to South Florida about 30 years ago. I'm from Boston. And and it's beautiful here.
Yeah, East Coast of the US.
My whole life, East Coast. Spent a lot of time on the West Coast. Still have an office in Los Angeles, which I've had for over 30 years as well, maybe longer. And there's a lot going on there. But yeah, I've lived Eastern time zone, East Coast. Very different world living in Boston, where it's very cold a lot of the year and you don't get a lot of sunshine. And then here in South Florida, it's the exact opposite, and the weather's beautiful all of the time. It's a very different world. So they're both East Coast, but they're very, very different lifestyles. I prefer the warmer weather, even with the hurricanes and some of the things that are very difficult to deal with down here. Growing up in Boston, I jokingly say that the 30 plus years I've been in South Florida, I'm still defrosting from Boston. Because man, it is cold there a lot. I shoveled a lot of snow.
Yeah, man. I feel like maybe Boston's on the same latitude as the UK, about England. But yeah, beautiful city, Boston. I've been there myself. Really, really beautiful place.
Yeah, that's right. It's very kind of UK inspired too. You see a lot of old English influence. And I learned a lot, and that's of course my career. I don't know what my career trajectory would have looked like without Boston, right? Because that's where my roots are, and that's where my career started. Playing the clubs and working with the bands of Boston, and all of that history, and that's a big part of how my life has gone. So
just paint
Boston
a
was
picture.
important.
Yeah, can you just paint a picture of what did Boston look like? What were the bands that you were kind of into in your youth? Like, what was inspiring you in the city back then?
Boston was and is a true rock city. People love rock, but it's very cultured as well. So there's a lot of jazz. So while it's not New York or LA, where in the States, those are cities that, every artist in every genre traveled through. While it's not that, it's a second tier to that, but it's still extremely active and extremely filled with world-class artists. So what it was like then is there was a really good club scene. So there was a lot of music for me to play in bands, rock clubs especially. I went to New England Conservatory on a jazz drum scholarship when I was 17. So I had both sides of it. I was really into rock, and I was really into jazz and fusion. So I played in rock bands since the time I was 10 years old. And then I was playing the clubs very, very early, about 12, 13 years old.
Wow.
And then I also had aspirations that I could play, jazz fusion, because I was really inspired by Billy Cobham and Tony Williams and, all these Simon Phillips and all these incredible drummers. And at the same time, I was, listening to Aerosmith and Kiss and Led Zeppelin and Van Halen and Black Sabbath and AC/DC and, the rock stars of that time. And that was the beginning.
Yeah, and you talk about starting drumming very early from an early age.
Yes.
What was it that first pulled you to the drums?
I don't know. There's a picture of me crawling out the front of a ripped bass drum head. So it looks like Keith Moon's bass drum at the end of the show, and I'm crawling out the front of it. And I
Nice.
discovered that it's unbelievable. I discovered that picture after my mom passed away. I had never remembered that picture. Of course, I was 2 years old. I think it was just before I had eye cancer. Because from the look of my face, it looks as though my eye is still normal, because the visual of my face changed, of course, after the cancer, and my prosthetic and my lid height changed. So it became pretty obvious that there was something going on with my eyes. So I'm pretty sure this was right before that. And I don't know why. It was the drums, and it just was. And I have had a passion for the drums and drumming my entire life, and that picture kind of shows that it really was from, nearly coming out of the womb to, onward. And I don't know the why. Paul Stanley from Kiss said to me once, the guitar found him before he found the guitar. And I think that's a really profound way of talking about how all of us end up in music. It's something finds us and pulls us, and it's like magnetic, right? And they always say like attracts like, and magnetically, you can't take away that force that a magnet has towards, its subject that's magnetically aligned. It just goes. It's like boom. And I think that's what happens with the passion that we have as creatives, with sound, with audio, with tech, with an instrument. And for me, it was the drums.
Yeah, the universe put the two things together, and suddenly it's greater than the sum of its parts, right? A
Yeah,
whole new world opens up.
yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about, yeah, obviously you had cancer at a very young age and overcame
2 years
that.
old.
It's a huge thing to overcome at that age, but I suppose is there, yeah, what was that like for you? And did you, how conscious of the gravity or the importance of it were you at that age?
It was really something. It was the gravity of it was massive. The thing that got me through it was that my parents are amazing. They're not with us anymore. I say are amazing. It's were amazing, but I always consider them in the present because they're with me every day. Their
Yeah, man.
impact, their
Absolutely.
impact. When you're close to a parent, the way that I was during their life, my dad passed away in '96, my mom in '04,
Sorry to hear that.
and we were so close. And so it went back from day one of my life. My parents were so loving and nurturing and caring. They were just outstanding parents. And I think I almost took it for granted, like we do as kids, because you think all you know is what you see until you grow up. And
Mm,
so as a kid, all I knew was parents are loving and supportive and wonderful and involved and all of these things that as you get older, you go, no, no, that's not actually how most parents are. I wish they
yeah.
were. I wish everybody could experience what I did with my parents, because the world would definitely be in better shape, no question. But that's what I grew up with, and that was huge. So to answer your question, when I was a kid, being the context of my upbringing and my parents' love and support, they comforted me and they brought me through what was a tremendous challenge. I mean, going to the hospitals was scary as hell. I remember, moments of time back then that I was just scared out of my wits. And then, of course, losing your eye. The good thing about losing your eye at 2 years old is that you don't know anything else. I don't ever remember seeing out of two eyes. That's just a memory I don't have at all. I have no context to it. My brain doesn't have any. It's never trying to process what two eyes would have seen with peripheral vision and whatnot, because it doesn't know that. So that's the good side. The The challenge to it, the other side of it is, going through that trauma at such a young age, changed my whole life. And it leads to all the things that, happen when you lose an eye. It's one thing. And when you have a prosthetic eye, it's another part to it, because now you have to deal with that and the discomfort. And you go for what's called eye fittings, which, let me tell you, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's not the worst thing that could happen, but it's certainly not an enjoyable process, especially on an ongoing basis as a kid. And then my eye looked different, because when they did the surgery at that time in 1969, they clipped a muscle in my eyelid, because they work in the dark when they do it. And of course, technologically, we're in 1969, right? So that enough said.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and because of that, my lid closed abnormally more than it could have, right? And that it looks like today, because today some people see me and they don't even realize that I'm wearing a prosthetic eye. But then it was very, very noticeable. So now I'm a kid with a deformity, right? So what that ends up with. So now
Yes.
I've got to, now I've got to develop tough skin, and I've got to figure out socially how to kind of fit in. And so I became the proverbial outcast, right? I think all of us, and you and I have talked about this, that the outcast is kind of the backdrop for every creative, successful person I know, right? I don't know
Yes,
anybody that was
absolutely.
like, right, who was like the king of the prom, and then they went on, maybe a football player, but the guys that and girls that I meet in creative, we were all kind of outliers and outcasts that just found our way on our own, because we didn't fit in and we didn't think like everybody else. And I think that's a really positive thing. So that actually, helped contribute to my growth. And it also gave me an urgency, because the trauma of being in hospitals at 2 years old and going through all those experiences really put a sense of urgency in me that's
Mm,
abnormally high, right? So if
yeah.
you're in a war zone and the sirens go off and you hear the planes coming and then you see bombs dropping, that's what it feels like for me, about times 10 every day of my life.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like it propelled you in some way to achieve really, really highly in your life. And I can clearly see from knowing you as well for the short time we've known each other that your parents instilled such amazing values in you of honesty and being yourself. And I just know for sure all of those skills and that way that they passed on to you has been hugely beneficial. It's why you've achieved so much in your career. Oh yeah, just on the outcast thing, I'm reading Ben Folds' book at the moment. Ben Folds is a pianist, but he grew
Yeah.
up as a
Oh, I
drummer.
know. I know. Yep.
And
Ben
yeah,
Folds 5.
I'm reading his book at the moment, and it's so funny of how much he was an outcast himself in school. Like, I mean, he was like escaping classrooms all the time, just like getting out of it, climbing out of windows in classrooms, and then punching the walls in places because he just couldn't deal with like the education system. And yeah, it's funny to see the honesty, the brutal honesty in his book is amazing. And what's also great about his book is how poetic he is in just day-to-day stuff. But yeah, he's definitely had that outcast thing that's propelled him.
Yeah, it's a big part. I think it's a big part of a lot of creatives' lives, and we may not realize it at the time, that the social awkwardness or whatever it is that's, just not the norm, is really a gift.
Yeah, it's like a superpower.
It is. I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you talked about going to learn drumming in your early days from a guy called Joe Morello.
Oh boy, a guy called Joe Morello is one of the greatest drummers of all time. He played on Dave Brubeck Take 5, which was the first number one song from a jazz artist that was like a pop sensation, right? And and he is an American jazz drummer who is considered one of the greatest technicians of drumming ever. And he has two books published by Modern Drummer, Master Studies and Master Studies 2. And he has a few others that he did independently years before that, all jazz related exercises and books. And I grew up as a very young person reading Modern Drummer because that was the only place you could really learn anything specifically about drums. There was no other outlet. Of course, this is pre-internet. This is even pre-cable television to some extent. So there's really no way to get information other than other people that you know and um, and magazines. So Downbeat Downbeat was one place I could get non-rock, information. And then Modern Drummer comes along in 1977, and I discover that, and I start reading about Joe Morello. So I start getting some of the records that he was on and hearing what they're talking about because I heard about him before I heard him. So
Right.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm reading all these things and going, wait, what are they talking about? So then I get Dave Brubeck live at Carnegie Hall. Castilian Drums is the name of the track where Joe Morello plays like a 15-minute drum solo. So I can't see it, right? Because it's a record, but I've never seen him play. I don't see what he's doing, but I hear and I read about it. And they're talking about that a lot of the things he's doing are with one hand. So I'm listening to the record. I'm trying to figure out, well, where's he playing with one hand? Because everything's so fast and so fluid. It has so many different tones going on. It can't be with one hand. So what are they talking about? And so I was really, really intrigued. So and then I started reading about the students that he had. Danny Gottlieb, who was Pat Metheny's drummer, and Dave Weckl, one of the greatest drummers of all time. And all of these amazing drummers that he's teaching. And then I realized he's teaching in New Jersey, which is a 5-hour drive from me, but that's close enough. So at the time, I didn't have a driver's license. It was before I was 16. There's one airline that flew from Boston to New Jersey that was cheap because we grew up without much money. So I had to do things, that were cost effective or I couldn't do them. So this airline was like, $25 to go and I could make that happen. So I got the $25 each way and I went on People's Express is what it was called. And you couldn't even buy a seat. And this wasn't Southwest, which in the U.S. is is an economy airline, but it's a pretty good airline actually. This was like you pay $25 and you go to the gate and you enter a lottery and you wait to see if they'll let you on the plane. I mean, it was bizarre. I can't even believe this airline existed. It's long gone, of course, as it should be. But it allowed me to get on the plane and get to New Jersey eventually. Oftentimes I was at the airport for hours waiting for my lottery ticket. And I got there and Joe Morello would not do more than 1 hour lessons. That was like his policy. But after I went to him the first time and I explained everything I was going through, that it's basically like a 16-hour day to take a 1 hour lesson. And
Yeah.
he
Right.
said, I'll give you a 3 hour lesson. I'll break my policy. I really like you. And I can see you're asking me for a 3 hour lesson. And I know that it's really not, we got to cover a lot more ground with this kind of lift that it took me to get there. So he was very, very kind. I did a 3 hour lesson with him. And I would go there like every 3 or 4 weeks as often as I could, as far as I could take the lesson. Then I would go back, show him what I had learned. And I would really, he was so inspiring and so impactful on my playing. He completely changed my drumming ability. The only thing was that at that time, I found Joe Morello right as I was transitioning to Technology. So I was actually, unbeknownst to me at that time, I was actually transitioning out of drumming, of being a full-time drummer, and into what my career has been since that moment, since over 40 years ago. So I didn't, I was with Joe for like 2 or 3 years, but I was fading out as he, was still saying, hey, take it up a notch, take it up a notch, take it up a notch. Because he only knows be a world-class drummer, be a full-time drummer. That's what he was and always will be known for. But that wasn't my path. And so Joe Morello was the timing was at the end of my drumming pursuit, but it's something that I still take to this day, a lot of the lessons. And he taught me a lot about the music business too, because as I was drumming with him and taking these lessons and getting to know him, I would ask him all kinds of questions. What should I do about this? And how did you do that? as a professional drummer, as a professional musician. He had
So
lived.
valuable.
It's so valuable. And it's what I took into my years of developing my all access IDA artist development company. I look back on what Joe Morello taught me as a 15 and 16-year-old kid that I could have taken 10 years to have learned the hard way. And Joe taught me in one afternoon. I
Yeah.
applied that same philosophy to my artist development company because it's all about making the most of the time that we're here. And that's much easier said than done, as you know.
Definitely, definitely. And I really hear you on that. I mean, must have been amazing to have the lessons in the drumming, the technical stuff, the all the details and the hints that he gave you. But I feel the same way. I had like a reasonably short-lived football or soccer career. And I think that the manager at the time, like he taught us to play football, to play soccer. But actually, when I look back on it, he also taught us philosophy. Like he taught us like a mindset that was totally relevant to the rest of my life. And I can see,
Yes.
yeah, I can understand exactly what you're saying there. Yeah, amazing, amazing to have that. And I think I read somewhere that you were aiming to be the world's greatest drummer at one point, and I love that
Yeah.
aspiration. I
Yeah.
just absolutely love that
That was
aspiration.
it.
That's like it's unparalleled
Yeah.
ambition.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, this goes hand in hand with the urgency. Is I learned in the same trauma of, not having a minute to waste. I also was taught by my mom and instilled in me that the urgency and the go big or go home. She would always say, do it right, do it big, do it to the fullest extent, or don't do it. Just sit on the couch and relax and just take the time off. But the worst thing you can ever do is be mediocre. It's just better to be a lazy bum on the couch and just refuel and enjoy the TV set that you're watching or whatever you're doing, or go and change the world. Like there was no middle ground whatsoever. And I think that's where that aspiration came from. Is it, I'm starting to play the drums. I'm playing on a practice pad in elementary school. And then my parents surprised me with a used drum kit that God knows where they bought it. I'm sure it was $100, which would have been a fortune at that time. But it was used. It was a pink champagne Rogers drum kit with a little cowbell and crappy cymbals. But it was a drum set. So I went from playing on the top of the table and phone books and books and practice pads to having real drums. I couldn't get enough of that. So when that happened, and now I was playing a real drum set, which was one of the most joyous experiences I'll ever remember having. When I look at my whole life, that's one of the moments that was the most joy, is that first day that I got a real drum set to play, because I'd played for years on books and tables. So now I'm like here I'm playing to Ringo's records, and there's a drums like he played. He had drums. So I'm like, this is incredible. And my parents would always say, you know, if you're going to play the drums, be the best drummer and learn that. Well, the problem with that was it's not easy to play anything on the drums, but to listen to Buddy Rich and Carl Palmer and then that and Billy Cobham and have that become your aspiration, that was a taller order than I ever realized. So yes, wanting to be the world's greatest drummer was a quest that obviously if I had stayed on that path, I'd still be practicing 8 hours a day to get anywhere close to those guys. But that's what it looked like then. So I was playing the drums. I had drumsticks in my hand every minute of the day, until I transitioned to technology. And then I really didn't play the drums at all and then eventually I got to the point where I was successful enough and had enough kind of all worked out in my life that I could go back to playing the drums some, because I love playing. And so there was like all drums, no drums, and now there's this happy balance between, I still don't get to play very much, but it's a lot more than it was during my formative technology career years.
Yeah, amazing, man. And I would love for us to dig into the technology stuff. Obviously, with Sonic State, the tech and the gear is pivotal and integral to what Sonic State does. But yeah, you have just to mention briefly that your connection to drums is still really profound. You have a museum, a Hall of Fame. You're also publisher of Modern Drummer magazine, so still hugely connected to the drumming world. But let's talk
Hugely.
about
But that
the
happened later. That's
yeah.
exactly right, what you're saying, but it happened within the last 10 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's go on to that stuff after we talk about the technology in this intersection. So, yeah, what was the moment where you saw technology and it sort of put a spark in your mind? When and where did that happen?
That's a great question, and because it is truly the moment that everything changed in my life, right? You look at our lives and you can kind of summarize the moments, what we'll call the tipping points. My eye cancer, unfortunately, that was one. And
Mm,
then getting my first drum set was another one. And finding technology to answer your question was another one. And that moment happened when I was so into drumming, and to your point, trying to be the world's greatest drummer. Well, what that looked like in 1985 ish, what it looked like was Dave Weckl on the scene with Chick Corea, studio guys like Andy Newmark and, Steve Gadd and these amazing, drummers, Kenny Aronoff coming on the scene. What it looked like was that there was this thing called hybrid drumming. And some of that was based around being able to play ambidextrously and playing open-handed, and like it was drumistic thing. But the other part of
mm,
hybrid drumming was taking acoustic drums and integrating them with electric sounds and electronics. So you would trigger, or you would have an octapad, or both. You would have a drum machine, maybe a sequencer. Like, it was way out of the lane of drums, right? But it very much was a part of drumming. So I started to pursue that because it was so foreign to me. My mom used to always say to me, "This is the most bizarre shift of a career that I've ever seen." That's what she would say. Because when I was a kid, Chris, as a kid, before this moment that I'm referring to, like, we used to have like prompt based computer classes, and I hated it with a passion. I would say to my mom, "Oh God, this is like math but worse." It's
yeah.
like it had no heart and soul whatsoever doing those prompts. 1 = nx3 f4, print. And then, and like this dot matrix printer, prints some guy's face that, you're like, and the teacher's like, "Yes, you did it." I'm like, "This sucks." And so I went on, and I very, very hesitantly looked at this and had any interest. It seemed so cold and so not musical, not drums, not anything. But I dipped my toe in it because I was in pursuit of the sounds that those guys were making that were not obtainable acoustically. So
Mm,
that's what drove me there. Short answer to your question, at that time, remember the Simmons SDS5? So
yeah.
I was in pursuit of and and I'm listening and I'm going, "Wait, I hit my Ludwig snare drum and it goes crack." And so how are they doing that? So that was what drew me towards it. And then as soon as I started to get into it, the first moment that, as much as I hated basic computing in the ninth grade, it was the exact opposite when I started to go into this. So I immediately realized that I had an aptitude for it, an interest in it. It excited me, and it was the opposite of cold prompt based computing. It was highly creative, limitless music making tools. And I said, this is unbelievable. Like, this can't be as exciting as it seems, because there's no limit to what can be done here. And MIDI was just coming into play. So I just dove into it all in, and within a year, I'm talking to the guys, Jim Cooper, who was one of the founders of MIDI at the MMA, the MIDI Manufacturers Association. And like,
Still around today.
I am in it, and I am like I end up contributing, and I end up bringing ideas and beta testing and product consulting. Like, I just get into it 1,000,000%. Like, I can't get enough of it. And that's how it started. And it still is.
Cherry Audio is running a blockbuster sale throughout May. Get 44% off Mercury 8, Trident, P10, GX80 and Chroma plugins, priced at just $39. And, exclusive to Sonic Talk, use the coupon code SONIC44 to apply 44% discount to non-sale plugins like SH Max, Yellow Jacket, Dream Synth, CR78 and more. Just apply the coupon code SONIC44 at cherryaudio.com checkout.
And I guess the difference between the two computing experiences that you're putting forward there is one of them is kind of like you sending something information to the computer and then there's a bit of a delay and then it does something. Whereas with like the Simmons drum kit and like sample pads and stuff, it's an immediate thing and there's an immediate positive effect of that digital stuff, right?
And it's highly creative. So it's both. It's real time and it's very, very creative. And the more that I know, what I've realized very quickly is the more that I know and learn and can put into application, the more I can contribute to artistic endeavors, whether it's live, whether it's studio, whatever it is. It took on a whole nother world. So it went from like pursuing drum sounds that were highly inspiring to me and very unique and different to entire recording studios. Like, I quickly evolved out of a drum setup and into a keyboard setup and into a full studio setup and into a full system setup within a year. Like, I was reading keyboard mix. There was a magazine out of the UK at the time called Music Technology. I still have all my back issues because it went out of business long ago. But man, that was one of the best resources ever. They were so good. I think was it Paul White or Paul Whiffen?
Yeah.
There were like
Paul
a couple
White's
of
Sound on Sound.
Okay, and then there was Paul Whiffen, who was a real innovator as well, and wrote a lot. And these guys, they're so great. They just covered topics with such depth, and they interviewed all the right people, and they reviewed all the right products because there's no internet. So where are you going to get the information? You could talk to other guys, that's limited by your access and your network, which at that time wasn't that great. Now it's amazing, but then it wasn't. And it was building at that time because I'm still a teenager. And there's no internet. So there's magazines and there's network and there's music stores. So I lived at the music stores, but the music stores oftentimes got things later than you wanted to. You wanted to learn about it early. So the guys out of the UK and Music Technology, and Sound on Sound as well, they always covered things at the right time. So I just devoured those magazines and just learned so much. And that kept me on the cutting edge, and it kept me inquisitive. If they're doing this now, then what are they going to be doing 2 years from now? Where is this going? How's it going to get there? What's the evolution going to look like? So that I could contribute at a much higher level, because you've got to see where it's going, and then you've got to figure out a pathway to get involved in that and contribute to that before it gets there, right? So that now what I'm thinking actually is implemented, and when it gets there, I am and was a part of it, which means that I think it's going to be a better experience, because my view, those years as a kid trying to be the world's greatest drummer, and just for the record, so we're clear, I got nowhere close to it, but I did try. And
the aspiration was there, right?
I did practice hard. But anyway, that's just to set the record straight. But the point is that pursuit, I learned to read music. I joined the Greater Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra, which gave me orchestral background that was really important and impactful. So, and had a jazz drum scholarship to New England Conservatory. So now, and I was in rock band since the time I was 12. So now I have rock, jazz, and classical where I can read music, I can play the instrument, I know all the composers and the musicians and the records. So it really gave me a repertoire to draw from that was not at all anything to do with technology. So when I found technology in my teens, I already had a deep music background. So when you combine that with the tech, that was the secret sauce. That was the magic, is having deep music roots and experience already, and a lot of reference to with the tech. And I think that's why my career accelerated.
Yeah, and I think often with technology, like you said about knowing where it's going, someone can describe to you like what a drum machine does or what an effects unit does, but it's knowing like what's the application for this and what's the creative outlet that this thing will allow me to do, like yeah, it's amazing. And I think the Sound on Sound magazine as well, they hit 40 years of publication, I think, last year. So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how many people all over the world they've influenced. And that was it. Yeah, I was going to list the some of the companies that you worked with over the years, going into sort of the digital studios, the first digital studios and things. You've worked with Avid, Didi Design, Akai,
Yeah.
Kurzweil, TC Electronics. Yeah, just talk us through how did that happen then? We've gone from the drumming and the technology that brought, and the sort of insatiable hunger to learn more about the studio. So yeah, talk us through the dawning of the digital studio.
Well, it started with, for me, it was MIDI. That was the first major contribution as I got really into MIDI and really started working closely with the manufacturers and the MMA, et cetera. And then that evolved to envisioning a home studio. And it wasn't necessarily digital, but it turned out that the timing of it coincided with modular 8-track digital, right? So now the dawn of the home studio can really go to a whole nother level, because even though we had limited digital desks, the Mackie 8 bus came out. That was a game changer. That was a huge, huge sea change. You had the two game changers for consoles were the Mackie 8 bus and the Yamaha DMP7. So now you had these two incredibly powerful consoles, depending on how many inputs you could deal with, that could do things that were only previously available on much, much more expensive and large frame consoles. And then on the capture side, you had modular 8-track start coming around. But I was really influenced by the Synclavier direct-to-disc and the Fairlight MFX3. But they were so, and the Waveframe even at the time, they were so out of my league in terms of, I could never even have afforded one then in a million years. So I would have to use them at a studio. But when you get into a studio, the clock's ticking. So there's not a lot of time to learn it. So I only got, brushes with that tech. And I didn't have any of those devices in Boston that I could actually sit there and really, really learn it. So, but I understood what it did, and I watched guys that were experts on those devices, those systems. So it really inspired me as to what was possible. And now 8-track modular digital comes along, and now you're going from $100,000 Mitsubishi X850 or X880 or Sony 3324 and later the 3348 to, to a 100th of the price, and now you're getting digital recording. So that really inspired me to get deep into it and envision what we'll call the home studio. And there was a magazine at the time called EQ Magazine, which was like what Mix was to Pro magazines for audio, EQ was for the home studio enthusiast. And that came out, that was launched about 2 years into my home studio building company career. So they actually reached out to me and they said, look, we're launching this magazine about home studios. and we're going to, we'd like you to be involved. We see what you're doing. You're obviously installing a lot of home studios and you're kind of at the forefront of it. And we have Roger Nichols on board. And I said, I'm in, and because I was such a huge fan of Roger. That's how Roger and I met, was through EQ magazine. And he ended up becoming a mentor of mine. I was with him till his last breath when he passed away. We were very, very close, and I learned so much from him. So that was all kind of the beginning of the home studio revolution. And I was just out front of it. I just felt that I could work with all of these incredible artists. A lot of them were heroes of mine, people that I grew up listening to. And now I could serve them in a way where they weren't technological. They didn't understand technology. In most cases, they never had a studio. So this was just so much firepower. They were so grateful that I could provide a solution that accelerated the creative process and cut costs at the same time. And I was so grateful that I was collaborating with my heroes. So it was really an incredible experience. And I had about a 10 or 15 year run of building my companies to build studios for artists. And then it turned into theaters and home automation systems as well. And it was the timing, right? You read the book, The Outliers, and one of the key things that Malcolm talks about in that book is that Michael Jordan at a different time in the NBA than 1985, 86, et cetera, doesn't have the same outcome. He still probably would have been one of the greatest basketball players, but the shoes, Air Jordan, and all of these things, it all converged at the perfect time for the outcome that occurred. And he points to how that's the case in every situation where massive sea change occurs. It's the timing as much as it is all the other components. And that was the case with me and MIDI, digital audio, hard disk recording, later on after Home Studios Pro Tools, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And so the home studio revolution that I helped create and was at the forefront of, that was the timing of it. Today, as we sit today, all the things that happened then could never happen today. That was the time that it needed to happen and was the perfect time, and it did.
Yeah. And I think you have to be open to those opportunities, right? You have to see the opportunity coming and grab it. That's also a skill in itself.
Situational awareness, as they call it in the military, I think that's really crucial. I didn't realize I had that until much later on, when I actually did enough studying on subjects related to it that I realized what it is and was and how to build on it. So yeah, that's important for sure. It's another skill set. I'm still working on that. The more that we can see where we are. Tony Robbins calls it the 4 seasons, and he said, life contains the 4 seasons. The thing is, though, our lives don't fall into the actual time period. So like summer, which always in Miami, right? Summer is always June to September, and autumn is always September to November, like et cetera, et cetera. Like, but in our lives, it doesn't follow that.
Yeah, that's true.
But yet it relates exactly to that. And so the best example I ever heard him say of that I love, I want to share it with everybody, is, 1,000,000 years ago, they had to realize, because they didn't have seasons and they didn't know this, they had to realize if we plant all of our crop for food in January, it's all going to die because it's winter and it's too cold and it's just never going to happen. But we plant it in June and it grows and we have all the food we can eat because we planted it in summer when it rains and it's sunny. So that one difference, doing the same amount of work and having the same goal, has an entirely different outcome if you do it in December or you do it in June. So the season of when you do something is as important as what you do. So the when is as important as the what. But situational awareness is what gives you the knowledge to know, okay, I'm going to do it in June. And so that's a huge distinction, right? Because, if you knew that you needed to do it in June and then you did it in June, you get the outcome you want. But that's so much easier said than done. So situational awareness and knowing the season you're in your life and knowing what move to make, that's something that I have to work on every day. And you and I, Chris, will share ideas on books that we're reading. That's a big part of it, reading and discovering the best places to learn from. Watching, I'm addicted to listening. I don't get to watch because you have to stop and like not really do anything else. So I don't get to really watch a lot of YouTube videos, but I listen to the interviews on the YouTube videos. And man, there's just some great, there's the thought leaders, and the innovators. They're there talking about, what they did, how they did it, what they overcame. That's hugely applicable to each of our lives to learn. And I hope this interview we're doing today will be for others. It's like learn from what happened and how it was solved or how it was created, and then apply it to your own life. And that's something that just, I think, is with us always.
Absolutely, yeah. Are there any people that you would point to that you think are worthy of people's attention?
In terms of the people that I listen to today?
Yeah, or yeah. I mean, I've shared Tim Ferriss with you. I think Tim Ferriss is an amazing guy. He's kind of he's so thoughtful, and he's there to kind of help the world in what he does.
Yeah.
He's a
Oh,
great
that's
guy.
a great book. Thank you for that. That's amazing. Tell everybody the name of that book.
Oh, the Tools of Titans. I've got it over there on my shelf. Yes, yeah, great book.
That's a must. You recommended it to me. I had not heard of it before, and it's a game changer. I think that, the core, what I'll call self-help, for lack of a better way to term it, core books, early in my life were How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The Giant Within, Tony Robbins, Greatest Salesman in the World, Og Mandino, How to Sell Anything to Anybody, Joe Girard. These are all just books that are, at that time, they're just books of getting you to be more self-aware, right? I think people when people hear titles like Joe Girard, How to Sell Anything to Anybody, it sounds like a con man, right? That when I heard the title, I was like, oh God, why do you want to sell anything to anybody? You want to find alignment, and you want to find the people that you collaborate with. A mentor of mine, a guy at that time named Curtis Knight, he said, no, just read the book, because it's not what you think. And in Think and Grow Rich, everybody who hears that title thinks, oh, you're just chasing money. It's not. That's so not what it is. Can you make a lot of money from reading the book? Yeah, you can, but the only reason that would happen from reading the book or anything else is because you realize how to take everything that you have inside of you and deliver it to the world at great service. So that's what the book tries to get you to learn. And it's heavy. There's so much to learn. There's so much to dig into, so many good habits that you need to develop, so much discipline that you need to fine tune and grow from. So none of these things, they might be easy to understand. They're far from simple to do and to implement, but when you do it, it gives you the tools you then can take and manifest the life that you want.
Definitely, absolutely, and thank you. Yeah, thank you for the recommendation of Think and Grow Rich as well. That is on my bookshelf, ready to be read when I finish the Ben Folds.
It's a game changer. What's going to happen, Chris, is you're never going to stop reading it. I started reading Think and Grow Rich when I was 17 years old. I've probably read it 300 times, and I'm still learning things from it. It's not a read it and then you got it and you go. It's like a life handbook that you read like one page and you have a year of work to do on yourself. It's really, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it was Napoleon Hill was hired by Andrew Carnegie, right? Who's the richest person to ever live. Maybe Elon Musk will beat him, but in the dollars of his day to today, it's in the trillions. So he was a train industry magnate and just earned unimaginable amounts of wealth. And so he decided, this is in like the early 1900s. He decided he wanted to leave a legacy of how he did it, how he created unimaginable wealth, because he thought it's not what you think it is. So I'm gonna give you I have enough money for the next 500 years, so I'm gonna leave you a gift and show you how you can apply the same principles, because you won't figure it out on your own. Most people won't figure it out on their own. And then Napoleon Hill was the person that was given the task to take Andrew Carnegie's wealth secrets and pathway to fortunes and document it and give the world this handbook. That was Andrew Carnegie's legacy. Now here we are, it worked, right? Almost 150 years later, we're still reading the book and applying it to our own lives and gaining benefit from that.
Yeah, it's so valuable. I think learning those lessons from people, like there are so many lessons that are just perennial. They're just everlasting lessons about life and about just people and sharing of knowledge and things like that, which would be great to talk to you about that as well, because I know you have like a not-for-profit and there's a huge part of education for children that you're involved in, which we will cover. But if we just go back to actually one question would be like, how did EQ magazine hear about you? What sort of stuff had you done in that intermediary time from being the drum tech to them asking you to do that? What sort of things had you worked on at that time?
Well, I think Aerosmith was the reason. I started working with them in 1989, and that came about from just hustling around Boston at that time for 2 or 3 years, but really hard. Like, I didn't take one day off, not one. Saturday, Sunday, Friday night, I didn't go to parties, I didn't go to weddings, I didn't go to funerals, I didn't do anything but work towards my career. Because of that, I was making ground quicker, right? It wasn't the most sophisticated way to go about it, but it was the most hardworking way, which from my parents, my parents were hardworking, working class people. And so that's where I started. That's what I knew. Later on, I developed, much more sophisticated and efficient approaches, and they still required tremendously hard work. But at that time, it was all grit and grind. So, eventually Boston is fairly small, which then we realize as we get older that the whole world is pretty small. But Boston was pretty small. So, I just kept working, learning, contributing, working on projects first with, anybody that would hire me. Then it started to become local bands. And then it starts to, it grows and it gets bigger and people hear about you. And somebody is working on one project and then they get another project and then they bring you into that project. The way everybody knows the business world works, especially the music business. So that's how it kind of grew. And I think when I started working, basically by 1990, I was working with everybody that was anybody in Boston. If you were on a high level in Boston, the Cars, the band Boston, which that time was Brad Delp, was my main contact there. Aerosmith, Jay Giles Band, New Man, whoever was the biggest bands in the Boston area, I was working with. And so Aerosmith being the biggest of all, and was still a contemporary band. The Cars had broken up, so I was working with members of them. David Brown, who was Billy Joel's guitarist at the time for many years, he lived there. So anybody high level, I was getting the call. And so I built on that. And I think that's how EQ heard about me, because I was doing more high profile things. And I was also doing cutting edge work. And I was talking to the manufacturers, right? Because the first thing I found when I delved deep into tech is bugs and problems. And so what do you do? Like, I don't have the source code to go in and fix it. So I don't have the EPROMs to, load into the ADATs or whatever. So I was like searching for help. And so I was the person that my clients were looking to for help. So then when I realized that it was beyond my ability to fix it because it was source code related or hardware bug related, I had to go somewhere higher. And again, there's no email, there's no internet, and I'm not going to get on a plane and just fly somewhere and try to find somebody. So I just picked up the phone, and just started trying to get through to people. And so then I developed, just by that, that pursuit, I developed very high level relationships, because I ended up talking to the owners of Opcode, Mark of the Unicorn, Alchemy at the time, Passport, who had Master Tracks Pro at the time, and all of these companies, because I needed solutions. And I was like, look, when I do this, it crashes. When I do this other thing, it doesn't, it takes the stereo file and makes it mono, like all of these things that were problems. And then they were like, oh, okay, well, let me try to replicate it. And they were FedExing floppy disks every day for years. The FedEx guy was at my door. He's like, who are you? I'm living in this, really modest home, to say the least. They're like, who are you? That you get a FedEx every single day, and so I'm like, well, that's how you got them. You got floppy disks, later on CD-ROMs, but it was just every day, just talking to these guys and trying to make it better.
Yeah, and
And
I
I
can
think
understand.
that would be how EQ might hear of me, because they're talking to manufacturers to advertise and to review products. And I'm sure somebody along the way said, oh, you got to talk to this guy. He's crazy. This guy in Boston, he's a lunatic. We ship him software updates every day. And I don't think he does anything else but sit in the studio. And so they were probably right. And there we were. That was the beginning.
Yeah, man. And yeah, I mean, your technical ability at that time, as well as your all the musicality you'd also learnt, I can see how you would be such a perfect like intermediary between those music software companies, the hardware companies, and the band themselves, and like obviously translating between the two, to so everyone knew what was going on. But I guess also it's really good, like feedback for them if they're making hardware and they're like, well, Aerosmith is using this thing, but they need this feature and we don't have this feature. So your connection also, I guess, is improving their products, essentially.
100%. That's exactly what and it still is to this day. It looks different and it's at a much higher level, and there's a lot of, career accolades along the way and moments in time that were significant along the journey, but it's still the same. You could still break it down to that is, problem, solution, application, efficiency, goals that have to be accomplished very, very quickly. And there are multiple teams involved that speak different languages, whether that's technologically or literally. And I'm the guy that glues it all together and sees the path to the finish line and then gets to that finish line as quickly as possible.
Yeah, man. That is so important. Like you said, studio time is limited. It's limited often.
And so is it manufacturing time, so is in product development time, so on product life cycles. So it's all related to the urgency we've been talking about, and my the skill set that I've really focused on developing and still developing. This is not something you develop and then it's finished, right? Like this is a forever development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're all sort of work in progresses, right? There's no one person who's got it all right. But I think they're all, those bands like Aerosmith and the other people you've worked with, Kiss, Ricky Martin, all those people were aiming to be like the best of the best. And I guess the manufacturers in their own way also doing that. That, all the Neumann and the big brands, Pro Tools, Avid, they're aiming to be the best of the best. They all want to be there, and that competition raises all ships, right? The tide raises all ships when everyone's trying to be the absolute best, as you were as well.
Well, that was my goal, and still is always, to be the best and to bring the best contribution and solutions. And now it's just gotten much, much bigger, right? Because everything grows and evolves. So, but it's been big for a long time. Big, how it is. Big changes, because big at the beginning of your career could be $1 million project. And then as you make those more and more successful and the projects get larger and larger and the responsibilities grow, not big could be $1 billion project, right? But it's always big. It's been big since when I was studying with Joe Morello. Those were big moments, learning from the greatest drum technician of his time, was as big a bite of the apple as a drummer could take. And so then as I started in business and I started a career and getting into technology, I was always shooting big and trying to contribute big. EQ magazine at the time was the Google, or however you want to, compare it, of that day, where people got information, where people made informed decisions, where people, had their community, all of these things that we do much differently today. But it was what we do differently are the tools and the processes, but the core of what it is that we're doing differently was the same. And so EQ just was the outlet. So I got to contribute a lot. And as I shared, Roger Nichols, that's how we met, and he became a mentor and dear friend of mine. And that was life changing. Roger Nichols, he's older than me. He's Grammy winning. He's an inventor. He invented the Wendell drum replacement computer. He was doing digital audio when the 3M was the only digital recorder for multi-track in the world, and he used it on Nightfly. Then Nightfly becomes the de facto standard playback reference record for audio, which we're still using to this day, which he and Elliot Shiner worked on. So this is somebody who had such massive contribution and experience, and he takes me under his wing at the perfect time, and it really helped me grow in areas that would have taken me 25 years, that he helped me grow in 6 months.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? Those people who see something in the younger generation and they invest time and help those people. It's such a valuable thing to do.
And friendship.
Yeah.
He was an amazing person, and that's a godsend. There's a lot of very successful and accomplished people that might mentor you, but it would just be solely in a specific lane, like get better at this, which is valuable, of course. And I don't take that for granted. But what was the blessing in Roger is that he was a great person. So we would, even though we always talk shop, we were such gear nerds. Like all we talked about was equipment and setups, and just our wives were like, "Oh my God, this is the worst conversation we've ever sat in." And it was it was really interesting, like how we never we couldn't get away from it because it was us. It was inside of us. But he was such a great person that was special, as well as all of the things that I learned professionally.
That's fantastic, man. He sounds like a great person. I'm going to do some more
amazing
research on him.
God bless you, Roger.
We sort of touched on the digital studios, and you have numerous companies, one of which is making sort of home studios for people, home theaters, and the list of artists and people you've worked with on that kind of stuff is phenomenal, including the Beckhams. I saw is on your list. Ozzy Osbourne, you also appeared on his show, right, when he was having a home studio done.
Ozzy was, that's one of those moments that you'll always cherish, right? Because Ozzy was a hero of mine musically. I loved Black Sabbath and Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. And I loved Ozzy. I loved the singing, the playing. Tommy Aldridge and Bill Ward was Black Sabbath, of course, then Vinny Appice, then Eric Singer. And you had Tommy Aldridge play with Ozzy, and then Randy Castillo. And anyway, so every aspect of his artistry, I really was a fan of. And then his television show comes on out of the blue on MTV at the time. And it's like this behind the scenes world of what it's like at the Osbournes' house. And at first, everybody just thought, this is, what is this? Who cares? And then you watch 5 minutes of it and you're just drawn in because it's so interesting and it's so different from what you thought.
Totally.
Right? Amazing show. And then I got referred to Ozzy by Mark Hudson, and Ozzy, I realized when I met Ozzy for the first time, was the television show was going, so he was a massive celebrity. It was a really interesting time to meet him and get to know him and be around his world, because it was so energetic. I mean, there was so much going on because he was already world famous before the show. The
Yeah.
show took it to a whole nother level. He became a pop culture phenomenon. So like we couldn't even go down the street. We couldn't even go for a walk together because there was so much paparazzi and there were so many fans around. It was pop culture madness. And when I look back on that, there was just so many interesting moments. But the first day I met Ozzy, he said to me, I've never had a home studio before. And I thought, wow, I can contribute something to somebody at his level, where he's selling out stadiums for 20 years, millions of records, iconic songs. The first song I learned in a rock band was Paranoid, right? Now here I am. I can give him a first. That was remarkable to me. So I was just beside myself. I wanted to hit it out of the park for him. And I did, and it worked out great. We worked together for 10 years.
Oh, it's so amazing, man. Yeah, he was such a kind and gentle soul as well, from what I've seen.
Absolutely, very much. He was an amazing guy. He was an amazing person, and it was a true honor. I built 2 studios for him, did a lot of projects for him and with him over those 10 years. And then he decided that they were going to spend a lot more time in England, first of all, and then second of all, he decided he didn't want a home studio. After having it, he was very happy with it, but he lived that for about a 10-year period. He said, I've lived with going to studios for the first 20 years of his career. And then, actually, it would have been more than 20. It was the first 30 years of his career. He went to studios, and then 10 years with me, he had studios. And then he said, okay, I've done both. I actually like the process of leaving the house, going to the studio. It was almost like going to a show for him. And he realized like that excitement changed the creative process for him. And he wanted to go back to that. And all the things, people coming into your home and just all of the things that happen in a home studio, he decided that he preferred not to do that and go to a commercial studio. So there really wasn't much left for me to do with him at that time after those 10 years, but it was a great 10 years, and we got along great. And I stayed in touch with him and Sharon, and some of the best people I've ever worked with ever, in any professionally and personally.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing to hear, man. And he's from there's like a hotbed of talent from where he was from, which is in the West Midlands in Birmingham, which is like 45 minutes from where I grew up, just to the west of there. But yeah, amazing rock scene that came out of that city. And it's a very industrial city. It's very, it's very multicultural. And it's kind of, it's an amazing place, really, considering what it actually looks like visually in terms of like concrete and stuff. Birmingham's been a real hotbed of creativity for the rock scene, I think.
That's amazing. Yeah, growing up in Boston, and at that time not spending any time in the UK, I didn't understand a lot of that. And but now looking back, it's incredible, right? It's I can imagine. So you grew up 45 away from that. So was that close enough that what you're describing was in your area as well, like that scene?
Yeah, well, I was born in 83, so for me I was way more influenced by like the rave scene, but they were so ubiquitous already in the music scene that people like Ozzy Osbourne and bands from Birmingham, then that it was just like legendary. They were already legendary people like Slade. My mind's gone blank now, but yeah, there were so many bands from like Wolverhampton, Birmingham area that it was good heritage. I think Robert Plant maybe as well was from that area. So yeah, for me growing up, I think it was the rave scene that took my fancy, but that was through Jean-Michel Jarre. That was through being a child listening to Jean-Michel Jarre in the car and kind of imagining like space worlds, and that's kind of what got me into the electronic stuff.
Love it.
Yeah, so I did mention Ricky Martin there, and you had a hit with Ricky Martin on when everything became digital. Yeah, what was that like? And describe how that came about.
Well, that was amazing. I met Desmond Child through my work with Aerosmith, and I'm sure everybody listening to this that's in the music business, I don't need to say who Desmond is, but for those of you who aren't in the music business, Desmond is one of the most successful and prolific songwriters and producers in music history. And at the time, he had already written "You Give Love a Bad Name" and "Living on a Prayer" for Bon Jovi, and "I Was
Wow.
Made for Loving You" with Kiss, and if I could turn back time with Cher, and just one massive hit after the next.
It's incredible.
And yeah, he's an incredible dozens and dozens and dozens of hits, not just hits, but anthems. And he was making the shift from solely being a songwriter to being a producer. And his vision, in this is in the 90s, his vision was, I want an all Pro Tools digital studio, but doing that at the time was nearly impossible because you didn't have track count, and you just didn't have the things that he needed creatively with a large format console and a multi-track tape machine. When he had his vision, Pro Tools wasn't there. So I worked with him, and he brought me on. He met me with Aerosmith, said, I love working with you. You're a very progressive guy. I have progressive ideas. I need you. Come down to Miami. That's how I got to South Florida. I'm sitting in South
Nice.
Florida because of Desmond Child.
That's amazing.
100%. So he brought me from Boston to South Florida because that's where he was located at the time. So he said, you got to come down and build me a studio, but not only build me a studio, build me a production center and build me the whole idea, the whole concept. I need you to take this from where we are today. So work with the manufacturers. At the time, Digidesign hadn't sold to Avid, so it was still Digidesign, and work with the other manufacturers as well and make this happen. And over the course of a few years, we were able to develop Pro Tools from, a sidecar, where you could use it to offload in real time tracks from a multi-track, an open reel, and then edit it and then fly it back. We were able to develop it from that to a full-blown studio where all you had was Pro Tools, and that was it. You had, that was your studio. You didn't have an open reel, and you didn't even have a multi-track. I mean, you didn't even have a console. You just listened stereo, and you were, and everything, all the mixing happened in the box.
That's a
So
huge change, isn't it? Going
huge.
from like physical storage of the medium being recorded on tape to
Yeah,
like ADAT to then digital.
that's right.
Huge change. Kind of much easier to work with, right? There's no physical components. Well, I guess you could do a physical components, but less to go wrong, I suppose. More channels to work on.
For sure. And the creative power with somebody like Desmond's mind and vision was just always being pushed to the limit. So we were the perfect team because he never stopped coming up with ideas that needed to happen in the box, and I never stopped pushing what the box could do. And I'll tell you, those systems were begging for mercy. They were at, you'd look at the headroom, meters, where they went from green to yellow to orange to red, and like Mayday, Mayday,
Yeah.
there's no more resources here. And they were like running like that 24/7. I mean, we had like 6 Pro Tools systems full blown in different rooms, and we had, he had a team of engineers that I was helping to oversee technologically. Then Charles died. That's how he and I met, and Charles became his in-house guy, and Charles mixed Livin' La Vida Loca, which, to your point, by the time Ricky and Desmond were working on that album together, all the Pro Tools only studio was running full steam. So it was only natural that Desmond said, I want to do this whole record in the box. Ricky agreed to do it, and they just, they broke new ground, and now Desmond, and by my association with him, have the credit of having the first #1 Billboard Hot 100 pop song to be entirely done in Pro Tools in the box. Nobody had ever created a #1 hit entirely in the box at that time. Now every hit is in the box, right?
Yeah,
Probably
you
every
like made the
probably every
blueprint.
song is in the box, but then it was the first.
Incredible, man. Yeah, what did that feel like? I guess it was like, what did it feel like to put that together, even before you'd put, started writing material? But also, what did it feel like when you did hit number one? Like, how did that feel?
It felt great. I'm not one to really think about that very long. I don't, I had a life coach long time ago. It was a Tony Robbins type of person. And they said to me, there's these phases of success that are circular, right? So it starts with, the idea, then it goes to hard work, then it goes to creation, and then you take a victory lap, and then you go back to the first step again. And they said, you are missing that fourth step, and you need to at least have a little bit of it. And I think that I have very little of it. I didn't take their advice on that one very well. So I don't take the victory laps for very long because I'm just on to the next one. So I appreciate it and I'm grateful for it. I do not take it for granted. I do not expect it. But I also don't revel in it very long, and I don't celebrate it probably even enough because there's so many goals going on at the same time all the time that I don't really allocate much time for it to think about it. So I look back, and what I really take from it is that we were able to do something of such massive impact because the whole industry changed after that. Because that was the moment that signaled to the industry, this works. And I know that getting to that moment, Chris, was so hard. The systems crashed so much. There was so much pain. There were so many incompatibilities, plugins that stopped working, and and plugin counts that it would get to like the last plugin, and then it wouldn't boot, it would crash, and you had to figure out, well, was it actually the last plugin, or was it some other plugin that didn't play well with this other one, and it only showed up when it got to that one, and you had to do so much troubleshooting and so much creative thinking to keep the sessions going. And, because the Ricky and Desmond and Robbie Rosa, who was a writer on the song and a co-producer, and Charles Dye, of course, brilliant engineer, these guys, understood that what was going on with all of this technology, but they weren't understanding of, hey, we can sit around for 4 hours while you troubleshoot and like we burn all of this time. We got Sony saying, send us the record. We don't care if you use hard drives, if you use tape, if whatever you use, like get us the record. Nobody really cares. So Desmond, on the one hand, was like, I want to be on the cutting edge and I want this power because it's the only way we're going to get these ideas in. Because his ideas were so forward thinking. You couldn't have 3 tracks all synced up in a room, open reel. Not only would it be $1 million of tape machines, but it wasn't functionally usable. It would have been worse than dealing with the bugs. So there really wasn't another option if this was going to happen. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe we were too far ahead and we had to go to a plan B, go to Hit Factory, finish the record. We didn't do that. We kept plugging. I had a lot of 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning days, and we got to the end of the project, and it was painful as hell. But we did it. So when it actually hit number one, and it validated all of the time and the work that went in. But I don't think, Chris, that the industry even realizes what Desmond and I and Charles and Ricky and Robbie, what we all really did for the industry, and not whether it matters or not, I don't know, but in terms of whether they care. But that's what it is. That's really what happened. And that was a sea change that now the box is the only way and everything's evolved. But somebody had to be first, and somebody had to have a proof of concept because there's so much money and time spent on making records, as you well know, because you've done it your whole life as well, that you can only experiment in that environment so much. So I think we pushed the experimentation to the fullest extent.
Yeah, man, totally. And it's like high risk, high reward. You know, you were doing something that no one had ever done before, sort of
Yep.
exploring the
And
possibilities.
Desmond trusted me. And I think that's the thing. If we want to make a point to everybody listening, the number one thing that I have really established in my career is that trust from collaborators and artists, because they really have to trust me. They really have to be able to say, we're going to, if you tell us it's going to work, even though the road is extraordinarily bumpy and it casts a lot of doubts on what's going to happen here and what the outcome is going to be, if you assure us that that outcome is going to work, we'll do it. And that's what Desmond did. He trusted me, and I pulled it off. And I've done that every time, by the way. It's always been not just with Desmond, but with every client. It's like the one common denominator in my career is a lot of trust, a lot of challenges, always the outcome that I told them we were going to have. And that's been probably the biggest accomplishment of my career.
Amazing, man. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think the honesty that you put forward in the mistakes and the problems to get there is also a hugely strong character trait, because a lot of people talk about like networking nowadays, and for me it really seems like a cynical act to be networking. Like, I hate that word.
Yeah,
But
me too.
people tell
I'm
me
so
I'm good
glad you
at
brought
it.
that up. Go on about that, because I so agree.
Yeah, it's not like it's a human connection thing. Like, connecting with people is a real genuine thing, isn't it? And it's so much more than just an objective. You know, it's
Yeah,
it's like you said about making friends with people as well. You know, there's these things that happen that are beautiful, that are outside of what you were even originally connected for, right?
that's right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think there's a huge disconnect, and your point is so profoundly on point, that there's a huge disconnect between networking and having a network. So I
Yes.
have probably one of the most established networks in the world in my industry. And I've worked very hard to have a lot of collaborators and build a lot of trust. And so now I have this amazing network. But the word networking is so transactional. And what we're doing is not transaction based. Even though there's a transaction at some point in most processes and all professional processes, because otherwise they wouldn't be professional, right? They'd be amateur or hobby. So there's always a transaction, but it's not transactional. It's not networking. It's getting to know people and figuring out how to bring value. And that creates the network. And I think that's where people get it wrong, which is what you just said. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I want people to get that from our conversation, because if you really look at it as what's in it for me, or I want to know this person because they're going to get me to this other place, you're missing the whole point. You want to know that person because you have something to bring, they have something to bring, and the sum of the parts is greater.
Absolutely, man. Totally hear you on that. Totally hear you on that. It's so true. Yeah, the connections that you've clearly made through your career have been just based on that philosophy of sharing, openness, honesty, integrity. It's so important, man. And I think
Contribution,
there's, yeah, and there's so much on like hustle culture or whatever, which is almost like taking advantage of people in order to get to the top. And
not the way to
that's
go.
only going to get you so far, isn't
Yeah,
it? That's
it
only going
really
to get
is.
you so
It,
far.
it is. And when you get something from it, if and when, it's a very hollow arrival. You know, it's a much more fulfilling and contributing place to be, to see everything prosper, not just you. This
Exactly. That's
world is
another.
not one person. This world is all of us. And together, you find alignment, you find common goals, you find common objectives, you work really hard. And you know, there's a brilliant business person named Michael Ovitz that needs no introduction. Everybody in the world knows him. There's a great book he wrote called "Who is Michael Ovitz?" That is a must read. And he is such a genius innovator. He always sees how do I, Michael Ovitz, sit, these are his words, sit in a place where I see that person, that person, and this other company over here, all together creating something that individually they never imagined was possible. And he puts them together, and these incredible outcomes occur. That's genius. And so he himself is Michael Ovitz and is this brilliant, wealthy, incredibly successful innovator, but he's the first one to say it's because I know how to put everybody together. So it's his network, but it's not networking, it's creating around his network. So his network keeps growing because his creations are so impactful that who doesn't want to be a part of that? If you're in this world and you do anything that has to do with what he has to do with, why wouldn't you want to contribute at the highest level?
Yeah, I think those people resonate such a strong energy, don't they? Those people who cultivate situations and things that are positive for a wide range of people. And I guess often he also takes himself out of the picture and just puts those people together and says, I know something amazing is going to happen here. You two
He does
go
both.
off.
He does both.
Yeah.
He's done both. And I think, all of us that have created, great things, and you and I have talked about this offline, it's like we've done that as well in our lanes, in our worlds. I recommended Scott Gilman, who was the lead singer of Newman. I recommended him for the band Foreigner. I happened to be in a conversation with Tom Gimbel, who was in Foreigner, and he said, hey, we need to find a great singer. And we were just talking. He wasn't calling me because I'm not a singer. We were talking about some other things. And he just said to me, I need to find an amazing singer who plays sax. And I said, I got the guy. I don't know if he's available, but I know he can do it. And I called Scott Gilman. And to this day, he says, David Frangioni changed my life. That was the moment that my life literally changed, that gig at that time. And it really, truly came out of the blue. Can you imagine, like, all of a sudden I call him up and, hey, Scott, you want to audition for Foreigner? Like, what? Where did that come from? Because it wasn't him looking for it, right? So the phone rings and that's what happens. And I think that's how our business works. And I think that's how the great things that happen in our life always happen.
Yeah, that natural flow. And I really enjoyed you describing the circle of creation in the Ricky Martin #1, because I really like that analogy, because like the success happens at one point, but you don't need to dwell on that success. It's good to enjoy it and recognize it, but the next thing that's on that circle is coming, and it's kind of like a sort of a circle thing that goes upwards, isn't it? Like with every success, you kind of
ideally
go to the next
yeah.
level.
I think, I learned early on from my mom and dad playing clubs at, 10, 11, 12 years old. I learned early on, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs. My dad smoked, and it killed him actually, because he died from lung cancer. So it was horrible. He quit, but he quit too late. My mom never did any of it, and neither of them ever did drugs or alcohol. So when I went into the clubs, and I'm a young child, highly impressionable, and I'm seeing drugs and alcohol and smoking everywhere, I got a decision to make. And my parents were so strong in instilling in me, don't do drugs, don't smoke, don't drink, that I never did any of it ever. I never tried it. I do not know what cocaine feels like because I've never tried it once. I don't know what heroin feels like, not once. Marijuana, never took a puff of a joint. Cigarettes, never took a puff of a cigarette. Alcohol, maybe in my entire life, it adds up to 2 glasses of wine from a sip here and a sip there socially. So that's another part of it, right? So when you talk about your life getting better and better and evolving, and this circle keeps taking you upwards, because as soon as you finish the celebration, you're back to the next creation phase. I think that's only possible to stay going up or stay at the top, however you want to frame it, if you don't have those vices or some other vice, gambling or whatever, that brings you back down. And so the circles keep going, but you just took the height of where your circles brought you, and you literally, from your own decisions, brought it all the way back to the beginning again. So you can go again, you can grow it again, probably can, because you did it once, you can do it again, or you did it multiple times, you can do it again. But how about if you don't bring yourself back to square one and you keep growing from that? And I think that's important. That's what
Absolutely.
self
Absolutely.
self discipline.
That's amazing, man. And like, it's such a grounding thing to not have those things to fall back on, because often it's like they take over, they take over your personality, they take over your decisions, they
Yeah,
take over your relationships,
they
and
do.
they lead you. I think that's the thing that I've seen with drugs and, alcohol, is that they lead people away from their focus, and yeah, maybe I really admire that you've done that, man. That's amazing, especially in the music industry in the 80s, which from by all accounts was like just, insane A&R money going on, God knows what substances.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
I
incredible.
saw a lot of it and heard a lot about it as well. But yeah, it's all, it's some, to some extent, it's how we're wired, right? And it's how we grow up as kids, and what kind of environment we're in, and choices that we make then, or that we see our parents make. So there's a lot of it that, you have to undo. And, that was just one of those things that I never did to have to undo. There's plenty of other things I did that I had to undo. You don't grow up with childhood trauma, and having eye cancer too, and not have things that you want to change and evolve from. So I certainly have had mine, but just that wasn't one of them. And I think that, that helps the speed of growth.
Definitely, man, definitely. And I can say from a personal point of view, I pretty much gave up alcohol 2018, and the improvement in my life since then has just been, it's like stratospheric, basically.
Amazing.
Like,
Not easy.
yeah,
Not easy. I mean, when you did
yeah,
it, you had to really, really dial in you have to retrain your brain. It's really, really hard, especially as we get older. We don't even realize how much programming is going on.
yeah,
Just
like the
running the
rooted,
program.
deep rooted
It is.
programming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So congrats on
fantastic.
that. That's huge. That's 8 years that you were able to keep it going. And I think, speaking for myself, on challenges similar to that you have to always be in check on, it's really a daily process. And for me, I meditate and I pray every day, no exceptions. Doesn't matter. I could be on a 24-hour flight, I still pray and meditate. Like, it's not environment or location dependent. It's like that is an absolute must for me. And I learned that through great, great coaching over the years, the power of centering and really, really having a routine is what I would call it. It's a spiritual routine. And for me, that's a big part of, I don't know if you do that or not, but to me, that's been a game changer in terms of keeping the demons, and the things that we don't want to be in our life, keeping those away.
Yeah, it requires a lot of dedication, man. That's really incredible. I find for me the running is like the thing that decompresses my sort of whatever's taking over my brain. Just going for a run, just sort of,
That's your meditation.
yeah,
That's what resets you.
yeah, that and playing snooker. Playing snooker is so relaxing. It's such a relaxing pastime. It's so slow. It's one of those things, like you're saying earlier, it's like your girlfriend or whoever's with you is like, this is so boring. Why do you watch this? There's nothing happening. It's like hours long for a game. But if I go and play snooker, I'm totally in that meditation zone of, yeah, good stuff happening in my brain.
I love it. Nico McBrain, the drummer from Iron Maiden and my partner in the podcast we have, Metal Sticks, he has
Hmm,
a snooker table. And I had never
nice.
heard of snooker. And he's so into it. He knows who the champions are, and he's got all of this memorabilia, and it's so fascinating to me. And I said to him, I said, "What's this?" And he said, "Oh, that's from Jimmy such and such, and he's the snooker champion." And I said, "Snooker champion? What is that?" And he was just like, "What? That'd be in America, somebody going, the World Series baseball, what is that? Like, that's just not even possible that you don't know." And that was the same case with him and me and snooker. So I never knew
Amazing.
about it until we spent a lot of time together, he and I. And we would be in his room where the snooker table is. I'd see it every day, and that's how I discovered it. So how cool is that? What a game!
It's so cool. That's probably Jimmy White that he was mentioning, who's an
Yes,
absolute snooker legend.
that's it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, he was amazing.
Oh, he
And
loves them.
right now, I mean, there's some incredible players right now. I think if you watch snooker and you play it, you understand the level of mastery that those guys have, is actually mind blowing. Like how accurate they are with
Wow.
how they play. Yeah, it's like the mastery that we see in like the biggest artists, musical artists in the world. I guess we should just finish talking about like, where would you like to direct people if you want to direct people in a certain place? What things would you like to draw attention to that maybe we haven't discussed? Yeah, some of those kind of things.
Okay. You know, I I love sharing my philosophies and the collaborations I'm working on when possible. There's quite a few clients that I have and work that I do that is confidential, so that will never go in any public for space. It will not be on social media or anything like that. But there are also projects that I can share. So I have my David Frangioni Instagram and YouTube. YouTube is really my place. I love YouTube, and I love being on it and sharing what I'm up to, because you can do long form and you can really get into it. And I love consuming it because there's just so many great videos there. A really brilliant director I was working with said to me recently, he goes, anybody who thinks YouTube is social media has got it all wrong. It's like YouTube is a television screen. It's not social media anymore. And he's absolutely right. It's my television screen of today. I get all my content from YouTube, and it's fantastic what you learn. And so, anyway, David Frangioni, and then of course I have davidfrangioni.com, my website. And as far as the things that I'm really focused on right now would be, AI and AI consulting. When we look back, and as we've talked about today, Chris, digital technology, MIDI, Pro Tools, launching home studios, EQ magazine. We didn't talk about DTS, but I'm very much into immersive sound formats, and
Yeah, you did the
I helped
Kiss.
launch DTS. I did the Kiss, 2 Kiss albums, and working on others. So the point is that I have my own Atmos studio, so I love mixing Atmos, and I have a Modern Drummer, which is the number one drum community in the world since 1977, which my wife and I acquired, in 2020 from the founder, and it's just such an exciting company and community. It is the drum world, all encompassing worldwide. So we're very passionate about that. We're very passionate about furthering that, and it's a movement, really. It's been a magazine for all those years, but we've turned it into a movement, because what the magazine always represented was the community. The magazine was, at the time, the way that the community knew each other and communicated and grew. But today, the magazine is just one little portion of it, because we grow and we converse in many different ways, and much more evolved ways than just a magazine. So while the magazine still represents the cover that every drummer aspires to, we're far beyond that.
Yeah, and there's a huge heritage, I guess, behind that magazine, as you said, being something that you were inspired by when you were a child. You know what it's like for your readers right now, the teenagers looking at it.
Totally. And being so involved in EQ and other magazines, or EQ turned into another magazine. It stayed for a while, but it also had a sister publication called Surround Pro. I don't know if you remember that magazine, but I was very involved in that because that coincided with the launch of DTS. And so when I helped launch DTS, and then EQ, the publishers of EQ at the time, MPA, said, "Hey, we think the world needs more coverage on surround sound. We're going to launch a magazine called Surround Pro," and I became one of the founders of that.
Amazing, man. Well, thank you so much for your time today, David. I feel like we've done the tip of the iceberg, but it's been so great to hear your stories and listen to you speak.
Thank you.
Yeah, wish you the best of luck for everything you're working on.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Everybody, it's great to spend time with you guys. And everybody stay safe, be well, and reach for the moon. And worst case, you'll hit the stars.
Oh, well, so wonderful to hear from David. We really didn't touch half of the stuff he's done. There's a great highlights video you'll find on his YouTube channel, which is like 4 minutes just explaining almost everything that he's ever done, and it'll knock your socks off. The people who are on there, the things that he's done, the things that he's done for the community, the charitable work he's done, the drum museum, all of that stuff can be seen highlighted in the video. But huge thanks to David for joining me on the show and talking about his career. What an amazingly eclectic, driven person, still doing it, still out there making things happen. One of the really good guys, and I hope you enjoyed hearing from him, and I recommend you check out some of the books that he recommended. Okay, I'm going to recommend an episode from the past, and let's maybe go to another drummer, Emily Dolan Davies, the former drummer of The Darkness, female drummer. Check out her version of Block Rockin' Beats by the Chemical Brothers on our YouTube channel. Absolutely phenomenal. Full interview with Emily Dolan Davies on Series 1 of midierror Meets. That's all from me. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again soon.